Hello and welcome. If I did pull this off, this might be my smoothest start ever. Hello and welcome to Talk Power BI. So this is where I kind of hang out, um, and usually I kick it off with a specific topic. This week I want to talk about DAX and filter context. Right? I have a theory around it which I would like to share with you. But otherwise, in general, this is just me and you hanging out, doing Q&A. And yep, I've been around, gosh, written a book, worked at all different companies, and been around the Power BI block, as they say.
Oh wait, were you getting my audio? Maybe not. Let me change that. Okay, so maybe not that trouble-free of a start. Okay, the audio should be a lot better. All right, my friends. So, yep, but this is not about me. This is about you. I want to share what I have, and I am here to take any of the questions. So I'm going to kick it off. And again, if you're joining live, go ahead and type your questions in the chat box. If you're watching a recording, then go ahead and leave a comment. And I'm going to kick it off with talking about DAX. But at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat window, or you can later ask in the comments. Perfect. So I'll say one, maybe two things about filter context. For one, I always hear, gosh, it's so hard. Oh, that's the hardest thing ever. And well, there are two things within that. It's kind of like an onion. Let's peel that onion, right? Let's go down that rabbit hole. First of all, and this might kind of seem weird, but I sincerely believe that as long as you think something is hard, it's going to be hard. I really think that's how it works. So you have to get past that. And to help you get past that, the analogy that I use is if you can think back to the time when you were just learning to ride the bicycle. All right? Man, it was so frustrating. You'd fall all the time. And you're like, dang it, I need one extra wheel. I need 3 or 4 wheels. How is this thing supposed to stay upright? It's impossible, isn't it? That's what you said. But now, I'm assuming you learned to ride the bicycle at some point in time in your life. To me, it came late. I learned in 9th grade, high school, so that's another story. But yeah, once you learn it, it's easy. So it's not about whether it's easy or it's hard. If you're struggling with something, I want you to tell yourself, I can't figure it out yet. Not yet. Those words have so much power. Okay? So stick with me there. Just trust me for a bit, right? Just stop thinking the words that is hard. Second thing around that is when I truly understood what filter context is. And man, I wrote my first DAX measure in 2009. And there were no books, there were no blogs back then. I was just doing this on my own. It was hard. It was hard. I wouldn't say it any other way. But you have help. You have my help, right? But the first time it sunk in, what is filter context? So at that point, both of these words, row context, filter context, gave me the heebie-jeebies. I'm like, oh my God, that's scary. What is that? And when it finally sunk in, it stunned me. It stunned me of how simple these concepts are. These concepts are simple, right? But why was I struggling with it? Why do so many people struggle with it? Hey, simple things can be combined to make pretty amazing stuff. I don't even say complex. It's amazing. It's awesome. Look at what it lets us do, right? Look at what DAX lets us do. It's mind-blowing. I mean, I have to remind myself how hard this was in my old Excel days. Yeah, let's have some gratitude, shall we? These are amazing. So the elemental concept is pretty simple, but it can be combined in many different ways. It can be impacted, the filter context can be impacted in many different ways. Each one of them by themselves is simple. But in totality, they can make some awesome, remember, awesome, not complex things. So what I love doing is kind of breaking things down and making it simple. Now, this video is already there on my channel. You can watch that later. It's kind of succinct. Here, with this live show, I get to talk a little bit at length about it, take your questions, and so forth. So that is good. So I like making things simple. So what I've tried to do is I've tried to break it down into these 4 steps. I can. That's what I call it. And the premise is that, hey, if I can understand it, a humble Excel user, you can too, my friend. Yeah, it's not rocket science. So yeah, we'll talk about what each of them stands for. So again, we break it down in 4 steps. And this, this is covered in detail within my course, Learn Power BI. But just to kind of recap some of this, if you have delved into DAX, you probably know this already. Whenever you see a measure, there's one part which is implied. It never says that, but it says, hey, this is sales equals sum of sales table in the current filter context. So this part is kind of implied. Oh, well, great. I didn't need to highlight it, right? And then the first step in ICANN is to detect incoming filters. And we have done in the past a whole exercise about where you look at a cell and you look at it cell by cell. You don't overall say, oh, I'm going to try to solve this measure. No, you just say, I'm going to figure out what's going on right here, right? And you pick that and you go from there. So you say, hey, what are the incoming filters? And they can come from various places, rows, columns, slicers, or filters, and so forth. So you say, yep, this is the incoming filter context. You always state that in terms of table column equals value. Perfect, right? So relationships, how they act, row context transition, we've talked about that. So let's take a simple example. Sales to females, calculate sales customer gender equals F. And again, we're going to start with a single cell. So we're going to pick out which one are we evaluating. And typically, you're going to do this when your measure is not working. Typically, that's when I slow myself down and go step by step and say, hey, what's the breakdown? So I do it. All right, I think something going on with the video. Oops. Weird. All right, so embarrassing. I'm still a noob at live broadcast, so apologize. Okay, great. So we have to start with a cell, and pick one. Just pick one. Usually, if I'm struggling with a really nasty problem, I usually debug using count, or even if it's an amount or something like that, I pick a small one where I know the number of underlying rows is not that many. And again, hey folks, if you have any questions throughout, leave a comment in there in the chat window, or if you're watching the replay, you can leave a comment there and I'll get to it. Often I do my future videos based on what your comment is. So incoming filters, this one is simple, just coming from the the row. And remember, try not to say it as, oh, United States, that's a filter context. No, not really. Try to think like the DAX engine. So you're going to say table column equals value. All right, so territories country equals United States. And the next step, C. So it's ICAN. Calculate does its magic, and I've since modified this a little bit. So there's a little bit of insert in there. Calculate. And other cool functions. Mostly it's X functions. So there's sum X, max X, filter, and so forth. Right? So they step in. So here what's happening? Calculate inserts a filter. So now it's changing the filter context. Again, a filter context, just a filtered set of rows. That's it. Customer gender equals F. So that's C. Oh, so side note, calculate overrides incoming filter. So if there was an incoming filter, it's going to override that. Perfect. Calculate wins. Yep. And row context, it transitions to filter context. Again, both of these concepts are really simple. Row context is the knowledge of current row. Filter context is a set of filtered rows. That's it. And again, there's more detail in the YouTube video, but of course I cover it in a lot more detail with inside my course. The next one is apply relationships, and relationships you can think of those as filter transmission wires. So coming in, we had filters. This was a filter context: territories, countries, United States, customer gender equals F. And you say, oh, now since we have the relationships built in, they're going to flow downhill across the filter transmission wires. And if they were both ways, then they could flow kind of uphill as well. And in the end, you just do the numbers. That's it. So filter context in the end, after all of that has happened, the incoming filter context, calculate can change the filter context, and third, they flow across the relationships, and then finally, you get a filtered set of rows. That's it. So you have, and this is exactly the same as if you had gone in and kind of filtered this in Excel. So it's not any different than that, but of course you notice how sophisticated the whole mechanism is. They can flow through relationships, you can apply them through calculate, but in the end it's just a filtered set of rows. So if you somehow manage to filter it using all the right customer keys for females and all the right sales territory keys for United States, and you would sum it up by calculator or by hand, whatever, that's what's happening. So lastly, we do the numbers where it says sales, which is actually a sum of this column, and that's the result that's returned. So I'm going to stop there, and for more, just check out my channel, other videos on the channel, and my plan with DAX is to give you examples of applying the ICANN rule. So go ahead and check it out. There are going to be more videos, but at this point, where did I lose my window? Oh, there it is. I would be happy to take any of your questions. Where is it? Yeah, there we go. I have some examples, and there are more coming soon. So, you know, that's going to be the place to go. All right, perfect. So some of the challenges I've seen around filter context is where, so, you know, I sometimes people say again that whole concept of DAX being hard, it's being too complicated. I really don't buy that, but I hear that quite a bit. And in fact, I would like to flip it. I mean, I think at this point, humans are a lot more intuitive and smart than machines are. Yeah, right. And as far as the DAX engine is concerned, it looks sophisticated, but it's pretty mechanical. It goes through this step by step, as we saw kind of in the ICANN thing, right? It just goes step by step. So it doesn't quite think intuitively the way humans do. So here's what the trouble I see people running into. So sometimes they would use dates month to date or dates quarter to date. And they're like, whoa, it's not working. But what you have to realize is that we have one perception of dates month to date. We look at numbers and we say, hey, this is what dates month to date should do. So I'll show you an example. And I definitely plan to do this one in video as well. So this should pop up in a YouTube channel later on. So let's say we have Jan, Feb, March. And this one is 100, 200, 300, right? And if I have a measure which says something like that, you know, like quarter to date, some quarter date, or something like that, of all of the above ones, a human would expect that to be 600. But what you have to do is, again, kind of break it down step by step. And sometimes the DAX answer is going to be different. So it's not very intuitive. All right, folks. Well, hopefully that was helpful. Again, you would see videos on my YouTube channel, which kind of talks about the ICANN rule, and I plan to post more examples. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment box. I would love to tackle some of your DAX puzzles. So some formula you're struggling with, like, oh my gosh, Avi, I just can't seem to get this to work. And of course, what I would truly appreciate is if you can send me a link to your PBIX files. That makes it so much easier to kind of debug and look into things. So yeah, maybe put sample data in there, or put very small data set, filtered data set in there. And yeah, send me your DAX puzzles and let me and my Learn Power BI class solve it for you. So hey, next week is something special. We're going to have a guest over, and she's done tremendous work deploying Power BI within her organization, and she's going to be sharing kind of her case study, her story, her lessons learned, and of course at the end we're going to have the Q&A. I'll see you next time. Power on, my friends.